Welcome back. So last time, ang diniscuss natin is some of the definitions of terms na magagamit natin for the whole SEM. And this time, we'll discuss some general principles in endocrinology. Okay? So what we'll discuss this session is hormone, how is it classified, how they're classified, their chemistry and their actions, and as well as the endocrine structures. Okay, so for hormone classification, there are many ways hormones are classified. They usually are based on scope of action, effect, target structures, chemistry. So yun yung main basis for classifying. So for the scope, they are classified as universal. These hormones are those that acts on all cells of the body. Meron din namang general na tinatawag that acts on many cells of the body, but not all. Okay, so yun yung difference between the universal and general hormones. And there are also local hormones that acts on neighboring or nearby cells. And there are also specific hormones, which means that they only affect specific tissues or cells. So yun yung in terms of scope. So they are either universal, general, local, or specific. So based on the effect, some hormones are classified as reproductive or sex hormones. So these are the hormones involved in reproduction. So digestive, if they are involved in digestion, and metabolic, if they are involved in the regulation of metabolism. Okay? So other classification based on effects is the kinetic. These hormones are those that cause muscle contraction, pigment migration, glandular secretion, and other processes that are similar. And also we have these morphogenetic hormones which are involved in growth and differentiation. I'm sure you are thinking of growth hormone, which is in fact a morphogenetic hormone. Okay? So in terms of target structures, hormones are classified as either tropic or non-tropic. So tropic hormones are those that stimulate other endocrine structures for secretion. An example nito would be the hormones of the hypothalamus targeting the pituitary, which is also an endocrine gland. Okay? So pag ginawa na ng hypothalamic hormone yung action niya sa pituitary, ang matitrigger is the release of pituitary hormones. So yun yung tropic. If the hormone targets other endocrine glands. Pag non-tropic, the hormone, ang target cells niya ay hindi endocrine gland. Ang example would be a prolactin. Yung prolactin, ang target niya is yung mammary gland. Okay? So, mammary gland is not an endocrine structure. So, ang endocrine structure are those that produce hormones. Okay? So, in terms of target structures, they are either tropic or non-tropic. Later on, magkakaroon tayo ng mas malalim na discussion on tropic and non-tropic when we discuss the HPA axis. Okay? So for now, we'll stop with that and then we'll go to classification based on chemistry. Okay? So which is much more of our concern for this session. Okay? So hormones are classified into steroid hormones. These are hormones that derive from cholesterol. So this includes sex hormones and adrenal cortex hormones. Then amines, which are derived from amino acids. This includes thyroid hormones and catecholamines. So ang catecholamines example are epinephrine or epinephrine. Then we have peptide hormones, which are made up of just a few amino acids in contrast to protein hormones. An example ng peptide hormones would be oxytocin and vasopressin. Then we have protein hormones. So these are made up of more amino acids as compared to peptide hormones. Examples nito would be insulin, glucagon, and growth hormone. Okay, so we also have glycoproteins, which includes the luteinizing hormone, the follicle stimulating hormone, and the thyroid stimulating hormone. So it is composed of molecules that have protein and carbohydrate components. Kaya sila glycoproteins. Then we have, lastly, the eicosanoids, which are small fatty acid derivatives. Example nito ay prostaglandin, which is involved in reproductive function and also for inflammation. Okay? So those are the classification of hormones based on chemistry. Okay? Now we go to hormone chemistry. Okay? So hormones are actually grouped into two based on chemistry. So ang basis for this grouping is yung solubility nila. Okay? So yung group 1 are the fat-soluble hormones and the group 2 are the water-soluble hormones. Okay? So usually fat-soluble hormones of group 1 require transport proteins in the blood especially. Okay? While yung group 2 hormones do not require. Okay? And in terms of half-life in the plasma, that means how long they are going to be active. So the fat-soluble hormones are relatively have longer half-life than group 2 hormones. Then in terms of location of the receptors of these hormones, fat-soluble hormones, ang receptors nila are inside the cell, while the group 2 hormones are on the cell surface or the cell membrane. So it's easy to understand this, itong difference na to. Kasi since fat-soluble siya, that means they can readily traverse the plasma membrane kasi fat-soluble siya. So it's just natural to assume na ang kanilang receptors pwedeng nasa loob ng cell. Okay? In fact, some hormones have receptors inside the nucleus. Okay? So not only are they capable of traversing the plasma membrane, they are also capable of traversing the nuclear membrane. Kasi nga, fat-soluble siya. Okay? So for the group 1, included here are steroids, thyroid hormones, calcitriol, retinoids, and icosanoids. Then for the group 2, we have peptides, proteins, glycoproteins, and catecholamines. Okay, so medyo na lang yan. So wag muna kayo magpanic. Actually, madali nyo maintindihan to, and we will emphasize on the things and these differences para medyo ma-organize yung thoughts nyo while we discuss endocrinology for the next weeks. Okay, kasi mahalaga maintindihan natin or maalala natin yung hormone chemistry, kung sino-sino sila, mga hormone sila, na fat-soluble at kung sino yung water-soluble para maintindihan din natin yung mechanism of action nila. Kasi nga, di ba, we mentioned already na yung hormone action is actually dependent on its interaction with its receptors. Okay? This actually just shows us kung alin-alin yung mga hormones that that comes from proteins, from cholesterol, amino acids, and fatty acids. Of course, we can assume that those hormones that come from cholesterol, like this cortisol, which is an adrenocorticotropic hormone, and this vitamin D, are fat-soluble. Okay? Not included here, of course, would be the sex hormones. Pero I'm sure na naalala nyo siya. Okay? So they are derived from cholesterol. These are all fat-soluble. Then this is from fatty acids, of course. Retinoic acid or vitamin A and prostaglandin E would be fat-soluble as well. Okay? Dito lang medyo nag-iba ang usapan sa epinephrine. Actually, ang epinephrine is not fat-soluble. It's from amino acid. And of course, we will assume na ang receptor niya ay nasa cell membrane. Okay? So yun lang. Ganun lang yung gagawin natin. Then for the protein hormones, of course, they are not fat-soluble. They are water-soluble. So examples are FSH, growth hormone, vasopressin, and thyrotropin-releasing hormone. Okay? So yun yung mga examples. They are not fat-soluble. They are water-soluble. So that means their receptors are in the surface of the cell. Okay? Okay, so that's for hormone chemistry. Now we go to hormone action. So hormone action depends on the interaction with its receptor. So na-mention natin yun last, na-mention lang natin. Okay? So to be able to understand hormone action and to be able to understand the interaction between hormones and their receptors, we should recall yung forms of chemical communication, mechanisms of chemical communication, and regulation of hormone action. Okay? So in the next slides, we will look at a very simple diagram of this, but I will also refer you to a longer video from YouTube that you can watch that discusses this chemical communication for a clearer understanding, or the opposite. For clearer understanding, hopefully. Okay? So, ano-ano ba yung mga forms of communication if you can recall from your visual? So, we have, of course, the endocrine or also known as the hemocrine communication, wherein a cell uh, secretes its chemical substance to the blood to be circulated around the body to reach its target cells. Okay, so yun yung endocrine communication. In fact, na-discuss natin yung classic definition ng hormones, so that is very much related. So actually, na-discuss din natin yung definition ng endocrine system. So please recall nyo na lang kung gaano ka-related tong binanggit natin dito. Okay? We also have the juxtacrine or contact dependent. So this is actually demonstrated by blood cells. We have the intercrine, wherein two adjacent cells are connected, usually by gap junctions, if you can recall from your fissure 1. Then we have the paracrine, wherein cells just release their chemicals to influence neighboring cells. And nire-release niya, not necessarily to the blood, but to the interstitium. Then we also have the neurocrine. Actually, communications between neurons and non-neuronal cells are called neurocrine communication. Then we have the selenocrine, wherein cells contribute their secretions to the blood. Okay, so walang specific target, they just release it to the blood. Either yan yung mga digestive hormones, so selenocrine yun. Then we have autocrine, wherein a cell stimulates itself. Okay? So of course, ang focus natin would be endocrine or the hemocrine communication, wherein a chemical hormone is secreted by a gland or a tissue cell into the blood. The chemical hormone goes to its distant target cell to exert its effect. Okay? Okay, so this next diagram is actually a simple diagram which shows how hormones exert its effect, or so mechanism of action, so to produce a biological response. Okay, so as you can see here, example like steroid hormones, and we also have the non-fat soluble hormones like peptide hormones and biogenic amines. Okay, note nyo na agad kung saan yung location ng receptors. You can see peptide hormones and biogenic amines have their receptors embedded in the plasma membrane, where steroid hormones nasa loob, so cytoplasmic, and meron din silang nuclear receptors. Okay? Okay, so this lower portion of the diagram, you can see thyroid hormones, which is also a fat soluble hormone, and retinoic acid, which is the vitamin A. Okay, so mapapansin nyo, these hormones not only have intracellular receptors, but they actually have intranuclear receptors. Okay, unlike steroid hormones na ang receptors ay nasa cytoplasm, tas from the cytoplasm, pag nag-bind na yung steroid hormone, saka pa lang siya papasok sa nucleus. Okay? So that will give us an idea, as illustrated here, kung paano yung kanyang mechanism of action. So ang ginagawa nito mga fat soluble hormones nito is to trigger protein synthesis or synthesis of substances like enzymes and kung ano man. Okay? So synthesis ang kanyang tinitrigger, influencing the nucleus. Whereas yung mga non-fat soluble naman, ang ginagawa nila is to change the chemical composition of the cytoplasm or the cytosol. Okay? So pwedeng pinapataas nila yung cyclic AMP, calcium levels, diacylglycerol, or tyrosine phosphate. These substances are considered second messengers. Okay? So once na tumaas yung levels nila, pwedeng they can trigger cascade of chemical reactions inside the cell to modify certain substances or proteins. Then, magkaroon ng activation ng enzymes sa loob, or activation of molecules sa loob ng cell. Okay, but take note that the changes in the second messengers can also trigger protein synthesis. Okay? So there are certain hormones that can do that. Kasi baka magtaka kayo, as you go along your readings and discussions, mapansin nyo na ba, hindi to fat soluble, ano? Water soluble to na hormone, but ang mechanism of action niya is to synthesize proteins. Okay? So yun lang naman yun, ano? So like I said, this is a very basic, ano, but if you want a deeper understanding, kasi for instance, for this case, ang dami pang iba't ibang types ng cascade of pathways of mechanism of reaction of action. So this is just a generic kasi for everything, for everyone. Okay, so enough of that. Now we go to the regulation of hormone action. So the basic naman lang yun, ano. So there are two ways how hormones are regulated, either by down regulation or up regulation. So what I would like to emphasize at this point agad is that yung down regulation and up regulation, kailangan nyo tandaan kung alin yung cause and kung alin yung effect. And the cause would be changes in hormone levels, okay? Not changes in the receptors. So ang effect are changes in the receptors. So down regulation, for instance, as the hormone increases, the number of receptors in the cell membrane or inside the cell decreases. Okay? Kaya siya down regulation. Bumababa ang number of receptors. For upregulation naman, as the hormone level decreases, dumadami yung receptors. Okay? Kaya siya upregulation. Okay? So, ang tatandaan natin yung pag down, yung receptor. Pag up, yung receptor ulit. Okay? So, para ma-avoid natin ang confusion. Okay? So, down regulation can occur as a result of inactivation of some of the intercellular protein signaling molecules. So, merong temporary sequestration wherein yung mga receptors in the plasma membrane ay pumapasok sa loob. Okay? So, that is called internalization. At meron din namang iba na talagang nasisira na lang yung receptors. So, pero yun ay after ma-internalize yung receptor. So, pagpasok nyo sa loob ng cell, lysosomes will act on it and it will be destroyed. Okay? So, pwede rin na nagkaroon na lang ng decreased production of receptors. Okay? Then, pwede rin magkaroon ng chemical modification of receptors, making them less responsive. So, inactivation or desensitization of receptors. Those are all down regulation, mechanisms for down regulation. Okay? So, that's in a way an insurance policy siguro, na pag dumami masyado yung hormones, hindi naman ma-exaggerate yung effect ng hormone. Kasi nga, mababawasan naman yung receptor. So, para bang makaka-reach na agad yung hormone ng kanyang maximum effect. Okay? Wala nang lalampas doon. Okay? So, that's it. So, okay. So, now, for endocrine structures. As you will notice, we did not use the term gland. Kasi nga, some endocrine structures are not actually gland. But we will start with the 9 classic glands. Okay? So we have the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, the adrenals, the pancreas, and the testes, ovaries, and the parathyroids. Okay? And also the pineal gland. Okay? So here's the pineal gland. So these are the 9 classic endocrine glands. So let's start with the hypothalamus. It's the brain region controlling the pituitary gland. So it is considered the interface of the nervous and endocrine system. Then we have the pituitary gland, which secretes many other hormones, some of which affects other glands. Okay? So then we have the thyroid gland, which is the major metabolic hormone. Nagproduce ng major metabolic hormone, which is thyroxine and triiodothyronine. Okay? So then we'll have the parathyroid, which helps regulate calcium in the blood. Then we have the adrenals, which helps in addressing stress and the fight and flight response. And we have the pancreas, which major function is for regulation of blood sugar levels, major endocrine function to be specific. Then we have the testes, which major function is endocrine function is to secrete male sex hormones, specifically testosterone, and ovary, which ang major function is to release female sex hormones such as estrogen and progesterone when Then yung pineal gland is for the regulation of circadian rhythm and the sleep-wake pattern. Okay? So, going back, kasi so 9 lang yung classic glands, yung iba hindi na tinatawag na glands, but they produce hormones. And these examples are kidneys, which produces erythropoietin and renin, the heart, which produces the atrial natriuretic peptide, the stomach and small intestines, which produces gastrin, secretin, cholecystokinin, GIP, motilin, and ghrelin. And we have adipose tissues, which produce leptin, estrogen, and resistin, and placenta, which produces human chorionic gonadotropin, human placental lactogen, estrogen, and progesterone. Okay? So, just to emphasize, in endocrinology, we no longer are confined with the endocrine glands. We are discussing all endocrine structures. So, pag sila ay kinoconsider na endocrine structure, that means they produce certain hormones. Okay? So, our references for this lecture are these. So, thank you very much for taking time to listen. Our next topic is not general principles, but we'll start with Unit 2. Alright? So, that's it.